the topic, the Paramparik Vidya, which is India's heritage, of which we are all proud. And I shall only be dealing with one small aspect of that, which relates to um, the Rasa Sastra and the Dhatu Vidya. Basically, it is chemistry oriented metallurgical engineering. The fact that I actually have been in the area of metallurgy, but that is more of the physical metallurgy. So, therefore, today I have decided, and as has been, you are already aware, that I am going to talk about the India's heritage in primarily metallurgy, and one such area. I'm actually sharing my slides first, and then I will talk. If my screen is visible to you all, the iron beams of Konarka Temple is what I'm going to talk about.
Yes, it is visible, sir. It is visible.
So before actually I get on to the topic of the iron beams of Konarka, which is quite fascinating, I thought. So the manner in which I have organized my talk, the overview of the presentation is given here. This Atmanirbhar business is a very, very important terminology. And when I think of myself, as was read out, had to go to some place for doing my PhD, which was incidentally Germany. But India was already Atmanirbhar in that sense, and for science and technology, they were not going to other countries. And the metals and materials in the flow of time, I will try to connect you with from the ancient world to the contemporary world, how the materials have flown, because we all know the materials world is today, and the so-called smart materials which have come are very important in our life. Process of iron making, then the Konark part, and the current study of Konark is something I'm going to add especially because we have started some more studies very recently, about a month back, and so we will also talk about it. Now, when we talk of traditions, I have gone through the kind of topics that all of you have been exposed to. So, India's heritage in the area of medicine, surgery, with Charaka and Sushruta's name, this must have been discussed already. Mathematics and astronomy, etc. Brahmagupta and Aryabhatta, the concept of zero, decimal points, these are all extremely well known. But one name I thought I would spend a minute with you, or 2 minutes perhaps, is Chandrasekhar, Samanta Chandrasekhar. I think most of you would not know him, and he was known across the globe as the naked eye astronomer. We'll speak about him for a minute. But before that, I want to tell you that when we talk of administration, when we talk of finances, when we talk of architecture, all these were part of our heritage. But what about teaching methods? Now, it goes without saying that unless we have the perfect teaching method, then the large scale societal involvement or engagement in the high level of science and technology and high level of knowledge in general would not be possible. There have been great universities, Nalanda, Taxila, and I'm adding one name, Pushpagiri. Some of you would be wondering where this Pushpagiri is. It's about 85 kilometers from Bhubaneswar. And Pushpagiri was located in the midst of extremely important three hamlets, which are known as Ratnagiri, Udayagiri, Lalitgiri. These are the Buddhist hamlets. And these Buddhist hamlets had the monastery. And so this was a monasteric university, just as Nalanda and Taxila. And Pushpagiri, as a matter of fact, was existing, I repeat, 400 years Pushpagiri was existing before Nalanda. But Pushpagiri, having existed for about 1000 years, then it perished. One doesn't know the reasons. Today is not the topic of Pushpagiri. Be that as it may, it makes us feel proud that we had a university as early as 1st century AD, 1st century CE, and the special teacher-student relationship, the Gurukul tradition is well known across the globe. I promise that I will talk about for a minute about Samanta Chandrasekhar, also popularly known as Pathani Samanta, 1835 to 1904, not many years back. So the interesting aspect is the Siddhantic way of the astronomy was known across the globe, across India, particularly in southern India, this and also in northern India. The Siddhantic science was well known, and Chandrasekhar was well versed in Siddhantic science. But he wrote his own interpretation. That is what is great. And these interpretations he wrote in 2500 slokas, which is Siddhanta Darpana. Darpana is, of course, a mirror. But he added around 1898, he added one more sloka. So it actually became 2501 sloka. And this was all in Sanskrit. Now, who knew about it? Interestingly, a professor in Ravenshaw College those days, he had come from Scottish Church from Calcutta, and the name was Professor Jogesh Chandra Rai. When he heard about Samanta Chandrasekhar, he didn't believe that this man could have actually predicted quite a few things which he thought was the preserve or were the preserves of the Western scientists alone. For example, how would somebody calculate the traverse of Venus or the moon and all the other planets and so on? This is what he heard. Then he has actually recorded it in his own memoir, his autobiography, which is written partly in Bengali and mostly in English. It's a combination of these two languages, where he writes about his first experience of meeting Chandrasekhar. He couldn't believe that in a remote village of about 100 kilometers from south of Bhubaneswar, he would meet a man with a pigtail and who would be telling him about the most modern science. And he didn't know enough Sanskrit. And so he had to first of all learn a little bit of Sanskrit to know this man's work. Then, of course, he had several sittings, and all that he translated into English and sent it to the Royal Society in London. And the Royal Society said, here seems to be, in my view, this is what Professor Jogesh Chandra Rai wrote, in my view, he appears to be an exceptional astronomer. And Royal Society said, it is not only exceptional, he should be ranked as one of the finest astronomers ever in the world. And until then, they said that the greatest astronomer who could also calculate the transit of Venus was Jeremiah Horrocks, an English astronomer of 17th century. And the Royal Society, I'm not going into the letters of Royal Society, these are all parts of a museum in Bhubaneswar now. Royal Society equaled him with Jeremiah Horrocks, and in some respects, they said that he was even greater. So such people existed. And today, the NISA in Bhubaneswar, I think they have kept a part of Chandrasekhar's work, and there is also a museum of Chandrasekhar. A planetarium has been named after him, etc. India's forays into the non-ferrous metals, copper, bronze, brass, and when you talk of the Chola bronze images of Nataraja in Tanjavur Art Gallery, and this was CE 1000, this is one of the finest examples of India's what you call the bronze metallurgy or casting. Now, as a matter of fact, when I was very active in this area, I knew that the castings used to come out so polished, you don't have to touch an emery paper or polish it, neither would you do any electropolishing. It will come out polished. So beautiful was our knowledge. Look at the fine structures also, which are all done during casting itself. Gold, silver, these are also known in India. And while, of course, in Mesopotamia, in Iraq area, it is not true, or it is also not known that India is always the leader in all metals. In Iraq area, Mesopotamia, in 2500 BC era, already gold used to be kind of smelted there. And other places, of course, I have been to Egypt. I couldn't believe my eyes the first time when I saw Tutankhamun's, the pharaoh Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun is an 18-year-old or 16-year-old boy, and when he died, they covered it with gold, 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers. Part of that you see today in Cairo, and the other part is in actually the tomb. And so we went to the tomb also, etc., etc. But in India also, the gold and silver both were known. As a matter of fact, a good amount of work had been done in Banaras Hindu University on the old silvers also. Lead and zinc both were together also. And again in lead, Egypt 3000 years back, 3000 BC, you'll find lead being used there. Again in Egypt, in Mesopotamia area. Mercury is a metal which has been used in India since long, and in the BC era in Greece also mercury was used. Incidentally, mercury was always used in some kind of magic or the old magic. So the installation of the mercury in the Roman world, in the Greek world, it was always known. And mercury, of course, figured prominently in the Indian alchemical texts. Ingeniously, in the ancient China also, the tombs of Cinnabar was used successfully as a preservative. It's very interesting to keep pine silks intact. So they are not just alchemical work, but alchemical transmutation experiments in the Middle Ages. So mercury was also known in India, and mercury compounds are used by the Indian women as a vermilion on the forehead also. Tin occurs in the alluvial deposits, and I don't intend to go to tin, but tin doesn't occur in India in a big way, but we have some tin mines. And the tin, when alloyed with copper, we get the bronze. But India, of course, Indian bronze was not always tin. It was with arsenic to begin with, copper with arsenic, and then subsequently we switched to tin. And so the brass and the bronze, brass was copper zinc, bronze was copper tin. But to begin with, it was not copper tin, but it was copper arsenic. And then even today, in many areas in India, they use a type of bronze which is copper arsenic. But arsenic, as you know, is carcinogenic, and that's how they switched over also to a much better material, which is copper tin, and the copper that becomes the zinc, the bronze. As far as zinc metallurgy is concerned, I think everyone present here must know. And if there is one idea you have to take back, or two ideas, one, of course, is the focus of my talk today is the Konarak. But apart from that, if there is one other idea you must take back from this lecture, and that lecture must be the zinc metallurgy, India was second to none. Why? You will hear just now. The zinc metallurgy is an interesting metallurgy that it is extremely difficult to smelt, because the smelting temperature from the ore that one uses is of the order of 1000 degrees. And incidentally, that also is the same temperature at which zinc vaporizes. So what happens is, as soon as you start smelting from the minerals, then it will start also vaporizing, and you can't get the metal zinc. And that's why in the world they did not know how to actually collect the material and make zinc metal. And it is in Rajasthan where the zinc metallurgy was, so to say, perfected, or the smelting of zinc was perfected. About 45 kilometers from Udaygiri, you'll find the Jawar mines, where more than 1,000 areas or pots are there, where which have been all discovered in the past many years, particularly in the past 100 years. And Rasa Ratnakara is a text that ascribes to the great Indian scientist Nagarjuna of the early Christian era, and the method of producing zinc. So what did they do? What they did was a completely ingenious technique. The pot was actually held upside down. So you take a pot like that, and you put this way, and when you put it upside down, and the lower part of that, the lower part actually they put a coolant. So this is where the lower part is the mouth through which the zinc vapor will come out, and the coolant is there, and to cool it and condense it. So it will condense there itself under the soil. So there will be a pot, and the zinc could be collected there. Look at the ingenious technique. Instead of allowing the vapor to go up, they would allow the vapor to go down, and before the vapor goes down under the soil, they would cool it, and so that the zinc could actually condense. So not just the Indian scientists. Here is a scientist who was from British Museum, Dr. Paul Craddock. In 2019, he got the what is called the James Todd Award, Colonel James Todd Award in 2019, and the James Todd Award is actually given by the Maharana of Mewar Charitable Foundation. He gives 13 institutional awards. One of them is called the Colonel James Todd Award, and Paul Craddock got that. And Craddock has been studying early metallurgy in India for about 30-40 years, and he spent or engaged himself greatly with the Jawar mines for zinc metallurgy. And the extremely important part is the award that James Todd Award, of course, Sir Mark Tully. Those of you who know the very important British journalist who was settled in India. He got the same award, James Todd Award. And V.S. Naipaul, the Nobel laureate, but he came from West Indies. He's no more. He passed away about 3 years back. And V.S. Naipaul also got the same James Todd Award. But Paul Craddock, for his 30 plus publications on Indian metallurgy, he got this award. But the beauty is, look at what he says. Paul Craddock says that Jawar is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. He says the European scientists would not believe me. And he says that the Industrial Revolution happened in Europe only. That's what he says. My friends in Sheffield, they would say. But I say that the Industrial Revolution began in India. Because in the 17th century already, where the Europeans did not know much about the metallurgy of zinc, the zinc metal was already smelted here. And he therefore says that the people back in the UK, my colleagues, he says, they wouldn't believe, but because they thought that the Indian metallurgy was only on a milligram level. But he said, look at this. Here, this is far ahead of the rest of the world. So that is why he says that the Western scientists, meaning my colleagues back in the UA, they have a prejudice against India. As far as materials are concerned, from copper to, in the early years, 5000 BC, copper was known, bronze was known, then came iron, cast iron, steels, etc., etc. Today, if you are talking of 2020s, then today, most of you talk about polymers, elastomers, composites. Many of us work in composite, ceramics and glasses and so on. As far as trade and commerce goes, we all know that India was very well known in trade and commerce. Coinage in ancient India, you will find practically from all corners of India there are coins which have been found. Even in Bhubaneswar, coins have been found at least 1000 years before BC. But this is 550 BC in Kosala, Mahajanapada. The Mahajanapada is actually bigger than Kharagpur in the sense that it's actually a big town, meaning a city. So there are Mahajanapadas, Janapadas and so on. So India had these big cities and then smaller cities, towns and villages. So you will find the coinages and they are mostly silver coins. So silver was very well known and even the forging of silver was also known. You can see, as a matter of fact, on the right hand side, in this one, you'll find some dendritic structures also. You'll find that with the dendritic structure is not broken as yet. This is the point I want all participants to take away with them. Maybe already they know. India's share of global industrial output, it declined. It didn't improve. It declined during the British era, of course, subsequently. And but India's industrial output used to be about 25% of the world output. You'll hear this. India experienced deindustrialization subsequently, but India's share of the world economy, it was in the year 1700 roughly 24.5 or 25%. 1/4 of world's economy came from India, which is why you'll find a large number of plunderers, they came to India. Because India abounded in treasures. And essentially because of these 25% of the world economy was attributed to India. And by the time we came to 1950, it was 4.2. Today, it is even lower than. Emperor Akbar's treasury in 1600 is estimated to be of $19 million. And the tax take of Great Britain in 1800 is estimated to be the same amount, $90 million of the Great Britain. So imagine, many people would like us to believe that the Westerners taught us science and technology. But you must go with the idea that even technology, we already ruled over the rest of the world, in contrast to the general idea that prevails. The South Asian region was estimated to be the largest in the world in economic terms in 1600, and of course followed by China. Now, before you come to the Iron Age, I just therefore wanted to tell you. So to bring, I have not put a slide here. So what actually caused the decline when India accounted for so much of technology? Then what went wrong with our technology? Two things happened. Number one, mass production at a lower cost, we did not know. We did not know because the industrial revolution had not taken place. And the industrial revolution, if you are talking of two very important things, one is electricity and the steam engine. These two, of course, did not occur or didn't take place in India. That took place in Europe. So the Germans participated, the French participated, the English participated, the Spanish participated. So therefore, the Italians participated, and therefore Europe became the cradle of industrial revolution that actually spread over 300 years. And from the industrial revolution came steam engine and also the electricity. With that, mass production became very important. And that mass production, whether it was iron or steel, or the mass production when it came to brass or bronze, or even mass production when it came to textiles, we had problems, and which is why India actually went back or fell back. Now let's start with our regular normal lecture. So iron age and the sources of iron, mostly of course you know that meteoric iron was the main source of iron. Just to show one of the large, by the way, those of you who have seen the British Museum will find a number of meteorite or meteoritic stones from there. They have been collected, which have fallen on the surface of Earth. And this is one such piece. This is a beautiful geometry which you see. This is nothing but the Widmer-Staten pattern of a meteoric iron. The meteoritic iron, not meteoric, meteoritic iron from meteorite. And the Widmer-Staten structure is primarily a structure that forms in ferrite under rapid solidification. So why did the rapid solidification take place here? Because when the meteorite fell from the outer space on the Earth, it must have gone through the Earth's atmosphere. And as it does so, it gets heated up and it gets cooled also very fast. And which is why rapid cooling gives you the needle-like structure, which is known as Widmer-Staten pattern. As far as iron and steel industry goes in India, from 1100 BC, actually now it is established, it may be about 2000 BC, when iron making started in India. Just to give you a sense of what the rest of the world was doing, a perspective on that, it is not true that it developed only in India. This kind of iron making was going on in Africa already, and in around this time in Egypt, and later on, of course, in Greece, in some parts of Europe, and the technology was very similar. So, which is why all these. But here along the line, if you read the second and third process, 326 BC, King Puru presented Alexander 30 pounds of Indian iron. I will show to you that that iron is very special. That's called a what you call the Woods iron, WOOTZ. We'll talk about it a little later. But the crucible steel process at Kudumandal in Tamil Nadu and what King Porus presented, these two are very special. This is the high carbon material, not the low carbon material. And this is the material from which Damascus swords used to be made. Long swords, very high carbon, all that happened. And then the Delhi Iron Pillar along the line came, and Kautilya showed the knowledge of minerals, including iron ores, and the art of extracting metals also in Arthashastra. And the Roman accounts of the Seric iron pointing to Chera region of South India clearly shows that in south of India, this was already known. By the way, the crucible process and the woods metal, Damascus swords, these are mostly in the south of India. Most of that was going on. The word woods, as a matter of fact, those of you who are Kannada speaking and Telugu speaking, you would make out that this word woods or woods is basically the Kannada or Telugu word for iron. So such is actually the synonymity between high carbon woods metal and the current word of Telugu. So if you go along the line, Delhi Iron Pillar is the oldest structure which is standing today in India, a 16-meter iron pillar erected at Dhar later on, but that came 320. Actually, there is some mistake here. Gupta Iron Pillar, which was later on moved to Delhi, that is the one which is oldest. But the Dhar Iron Pillar is actually taller than that. We'll talk about it. So Malabar Jewish merchants started exporting iron from India. And the Jews came to Malabar, to Kerala, already by 10th century. So by 12th century, now why did they come? Because they were persecuted. So they were seeking a haven or a shelter, safe shelter, and that's how they came to Kerala. And then came the 13th century, the Konark temple and the iron beams. We'll talk about it, etc., etc. I don't have to read these, but equally important is the Tata Iron and Steel Company, with which I was associated, came up in the year 1907. Actually, 1904, the registration took place. Bengal Iron Works in Kulti was earlier than that, 1870. But of course, that didn't continue. But the Tata Iron and Steel Company, 1904 registered, 1907 the first iron, 1911 actually the first steel started. Howrah Bridge came up during the First World War. Howrah Bridge. From that, for that, 18,000 tons of steel were provided by Tata Steel, and then came the Mysore Iron Works in Bhadravati Steel. Hindustan Steel Limited, now known as Steel Authority of India Limited (SAIL), is renamed, but the first name was Hindustan Steel. That came up in 1954, etc., etc. Visakhapatnam Steel, which is the RINL, Rashtriya Ispat Nigam Limited. And the liberalization of Indian economy took place in the 90s. With that, a lot of overseas plants were acquired by Tata Steel, and Indian plants also were taken over by the other steel companies. So today, as you know, I think it will be incomplete unless I say today the largest steel maker in the world, and that is ArcelorMittal, AM, is in India. Difficult to say whether it is in India because it is located in more than 50 countries or probably 60 countries. But they are the largest steel plant they have. Total steel they produce more than 115 tons or 120 tons. And the whole of India produces about 100 tons. But ArcelorMittal alone produces more than 120 tons because many of their plants are outside India. Many of their plants are in the American subcontinent. Many of their plants are also European continent, etc. And some of you have heard the name of ArcelorMittal and Nippon Steel. The company is known as NS stroke AM. NS standing for Nippon Steel, and AM standing for ArcelorMittal. They have joined hands, and they took over a company from SR in Hajira, and that is today known as AM stroke NS Steel. The Nippon Steel NS stroke AM Steel. So today, therefore, India as a country is number 2 in terms of steel production. We roughly produce 120, but how much does China produce? China produces roughly 1,000 million tons. And how much does the world produce? The world will produce about 1,900 million tons. Let's say 2,000. So to a little over 50% is by China. India is a distant second, but we are second. That's a very important point we will remember because India is now poised to grow to 250 tons and then 300 tons very soon. So one has to see what happens, the impact of that. So ancient Indian traditions in iron and steel, let us see how they were they were being produced. They are produced through a process which is called the bloomery process. So in the bloomery process, you take some fine ore, iron ore, mix with just charcoal, and charcoal you make by burning the wood, the branches of wood, and then, as you know, it is very little of air, and because they put sand over that, so that it doesn't become ash. It goes to some extent, the volatilic matter of the branches or the wood, that gets evaporated, and most of the carbonaceous elements, they remain there, so that the charcoal will act as a fuel. Then you mix it together and heat it in a small furnace, which is called the bloomery furnace. And if one goes to a temperature of roughly 1250 degrees centigrade, you form a semi-solid fused mass. Allow me to spend 1 minute why it is semi-solid, because those of you who know metallurgy or chemistry, you know that all these minerals of iron ore, that means hematite, magnetite, and so on, and these are goethite. So all these are oxides, hydroxides, etc. So the oxides of iron, if you reduce, and what is the reductant? The reductant is carbon. Where does the carbon come from? The carbon comes from charcoal. So now if iron oxide is reduced by carbon, so what comes out is iron as an element or metal. And iron melts at 1539, let's say 1540 degrees. If you want to make it flow, then you have to keep the temperature at least 1600 degrees centigrade. So unless you attain a temperature of 1600 degrees centigrade, you will not get liquid iron. This is the point I wanted to make. And in the Indian subcontinent, we did not have a container, which is the refractory container, which could go to that high temperature of 1600 degrees centigrade in order that it can actually hold the liquid steel or liquid iron. So what the Indians did, and also the other countries around the globe, also many of them, they did the same trick. And the trick is that in the iron ore, apart from iron oxide, there are many other oxides such as aluminum oxide, silicon oxide, manganese oxide. Primarily these oxides are there, silicon oxide and aluminum oxide. Now, silicon oxide, of course, you can well imagine, because they contain a lot of sand. So, and all these oxides, each one of them, they melt at very high temperature. But if you put them together, they have ternary, quaternary, eutectic points. That means their melting point actually falls. So much so that if you come to 1200, 1250 degrees centigrade, many of these oxides put together, they melt. So, and they are our slag. They are slag because we are not taking out the metal silicon or the metal aluminum in this process. Our interest here is only metal iron. But iron has been reduced by carbon, even in the solid state. And but the iron that is produced now, it has a very high melting point, and the melting point is of the order of 1540. Let's say, unless it is 1600, it will not flow. So you have solid iron and you have liquid slag. If you mix it together, you get a semi-solid fused mass. So that semi-solid fused mass now is hammered by the hammers, and then by hammering it, the liquid is expelled, and the liquid is expelled as nuggets of slag. So all ancient iron making process, you'll find the liquid slag is expelled. What remains is actually slag. So this is the bloomery in operation. These are small ovens, and to that, the tuyer or bellow on the, you can see the opening there. Now, I have not shown the bellow being connected, but you can see that. Incidentally, those of you who are interested in ancient iron making processes in India, in Africa, you can go to the YouTube. There are some excellent iron making processes. You'll find them. They have been revitalized, revived in some cases only for the movie purpose. And as I have written there, and the opening at the bottom, you push air, you can remove also the bloomery iron. Now this is how typically it would look at. So this is a semi-solid mass, and people, if you start hammering it, an iron bloom just removed from the furnace. Surrounding it are pieces of slag that have been pounded off by the hammer. So if you do that, what remains is iron, what is expelled is the slag. So the ancient iron furnace, preparation of the charcoal, iron ore, etc., etc. Again, now I come to some of the iron pillars of India. These are actually India's heritage. So these iron pillars, you'll find Delhi iron pillar. Alongside, I have shown Ashokan stone pillar in Vaishali in Bihar. Now, this is a very important distinction that I wanted to make, and people who are attending this lecture should not go back with the idea that Ashokan pillars are also iron pillars. No, all Ashokan pillars are stone pillars, and there are only 4 iron pillars in India which have been discovered so far. So the Ashokan pillar, for example, in Vaishali, is a huge stone, and the Maurya Emperor Ashoka, during his reign, erected these, and the sandstone pillars for propagating Buddhism. The pillars actually were built essentially to kind of extol a king's exploits on the battleground or the wars. Either that or some kind of commandments to teach the people or the army as to how they should behave. Ashoka's pillars are Ashoka's commandments. As a matter of fact, there are some stone commandments also near Bhubaneswar. Those of you who have seen Dhauligiri, the tourist people will take you to the mountain top to show a Japanese temple in Dhauligiri, but the Japanese temple is hardly 60 years old. You don't go there to see a 60-year-old structure. People usually ignore what is there at the foot of the structure. At the foot of the structure, you'll find stone commandments, which are inscriptions of Ashoka, which will go over 2,500 years. So that's what I'm talking about. But if you make a pillar, if in India there are many such Ashoka pillars, these are at least 30 feet, 32 feet, and they weigh very highly, 50 tons at least. Now, this pillar, of course, you know quite well. This was at the original lion capital, minus the inverted bell, which is underneath this part, the lower part. The lower part is not accepted by the national emblem. Only from here to this part. So you can see at any time only 3 lions, but actually this is a 4-lion national emblem. But you can see on a 2-dimension only 3 lions. This is from the Ashoka pillar. This is from the marble stone. This is not iron. Whereas Delhi iron pillar, which is more than 1800 years old, this is more than 2000 years, and yet it has remained rust free, which is why it attracted the attention of most of the metallurgists around the globe. And so one such was Professor Hadfield from England, who said that I have discovered it. Actually, it was existing. 1912 he discovered. 2012, the world community actually paid its tribute to Delhi iron pillar when American Society of Metals gifted a plaque which is supposed to be placed at the foot of the Delhi iron pillar now, extolling the work of the Indian metallurgists. These are some of the details. Delhi iron pillar, as you all know, which weighs just more than 7 meters high and 6 tons. Incidentally, it was not existing here. It was existing in Vishnupada Hill, somewhere in Madhya Pradesh. And during the Chandragupta Vikramaditya, not the Chandragupta of the Maurya dynasty, and during his time it was erected there. And then much later in the 12th century, some people say, 13th century, some other people say it came to Delhi, and in Delhi it was re-erected. The foundation was re-erected, and that is how it has been put. So for 1800 years, how did it remain rust-free? A lot of work has been done. I think the best part of the work has been done by IIT Kanpur, by a young metallurgist then, Professor Bala Subramaniam. And Bala sadly died at the age of 42 or 43, but not before he has contributed a great deal to the corrosion resistance, electrochemistry of Delhi iron pillar, etc., etc. So now we know that amorphous layer and plus iron hydrogen phosphate layer together make the Delhi iron pillar rust free. In addition to that, of course, it is a conical structure which is standing straight, and therefore it doesn't collect water. And thirdly, Delhi is far up from the seashore, and therefore these are the reasons in favor of the Delhi iron pillar not collecting too much of rust. So it has high phosphorus and it is away from the sea, and it is conical and straight. In contrast, you will find what happens to the Konarka iron beams. Apart from the Delhi iron pillar, you have Dhar iron pillar, again in Madhya Pradesh, and in Dhar iron pillar, the pillars were lying in so many stages because these are 4 pieces actually. They fell and they broke, and now Archaeological Survey of India has put them together. And if you put that together, Dhar iron pillar, only one can talk on and on, but it is taller than Delhi iron pillar. But unfortunately, it is not standing, it is lying on ground. Many people do not know that it is taller and heavier than Delhi iron pillar. Then there is an iron pillar at Mandu, also not very far from Dhar. It is again in Madhya Pradesh. So this is the 3rd iron pillar, and the 4th iron pillar is at Kodachadri. It is an Adi Mukambika temple in Kodachadri village in a remote forest area of Western Ghats in Karnataka state. It's about 40 kilometers from Kolluru, a town located in the plains. From Mangalore one has to go. So if I were to summarize the pillars, iron pillars in India, India had great traditions in iron making, sinter forging, because these tall pillars you cannot make in one go. obvious. That's why it is a big challenge, and that is how the world started admiring huge pillars. How did you make? How did our ancestors make them? Obviously, they made them in pieces, small piece, then next, etc., etc. There is an interesting debate between Balasubramaniam and the others who worked earlier on, including Professor Anantharaman, who wrote a very readable book called The Rustless Wonder That India Was. And in that readable book, he is referring to the iron pillar, which is vertical, and how it was put on the day one itself vertical. But Balasubramanian has contested this view, and I don't intend to go into all arguments. Suffice it to say, we have more or less accepted now that even Delhi Iron Pillar was horizontally lying, and it was erected horizontally the whole length, because you have to go on adding length to that, heat up and forge, pour this semi-solid material, hammer it, and forge it. So it is actually the forge welding part, and with that horizontally it was all done, and then you put it vertical and you get the entire length today. I now go to the crucible steel, which became the Damascus swords. And sorry, somebody wanted to hear something? Somebody is asking something? Okay. So the high carbon blades, these are known as Damascus blades. This is actually taken from Scientific American cover page 1999 by Professor John Verhoeven. Now, John Verhoeven actually says, I have demystified the mystery of Damascus blades. What was so great about these blades? These are high carbon of the order of 1.6 and higher. And we all know that the moment you have this kind of higher carbon, the material becomes extremely brittle. So if it became brittle, how did you actually make long swords, which would require to be slightly bent also? When you wield a blade in the battlefield, it will actually bend. So how will it have so much of ductility? It will become brittle. So that's a kind of, it was a challenge, and it was also a wonder. And now we know extremely fine grains were there. How did they produce fine grains? How did they know that fine grains actually impart strength but increases ductility? So all these are interesting studies. We did some work at the National Metallurgical Lab in Jamshedpur, and we are very glad that we could contribute some knowledge to this. I told you about, right at the first slide, I think I showed King Puru on the right hand side, and the Emperor Alexander is on the left hand side. I don't have to recognize, you will find no difficulty in recognizing the two, because Alexander is wearing his headgear, which is the typical Greek headgear, and on right is the Indian King Puru from the Punjab. And of course, we all know the history books tell us how Puru was defeated by Alexander, but he is giving him something on a platter. And we all know now from the history records that what he is showing to him is actually the high carbon material woods. And as if to tell, you may have won the war on the battlefield, but in technology, I don't think you can match me. And that's the high carbon material. And this high carbon material, which is known as woods, it is more than 1.3%. And how they added carbon from the wrought iron is something which is interesting, but I am not getting into that. But they went to the high carbon, and even this production of steel by Rukbeda, this is of course in Hindi, translation of that clearly shows that we had all kinds of iron making, and our scriptures told us about it. Not only that, if you go from the kinds of iron, from the low carbon to the high carbon, from Loha to cast iron, which is Munda Loha, from Bharmaka, which is very soft magnetic material, extremely low carbon, to very high carbon white cast iron, which is called Kadara. So I don't want to read it out. You can actually later on read out whatever I have. This clearly shows that since we have a Sanskrit name from Bharmaka to Chumbaka to Karsaka to Kadara, that clearly shows we knew most of the iron carbon compounds. Now I come to the Odisha's tradition in temple construction. Now here, those of you who know the state of Odisha will recognize it immediately. Those of you who do not know this, it doesn't matter, because on the eastern coast of India, Odisha lies, and it has about 480 kilometers of coastline. And on the coastline, you will find some great temples. We are somewhere here. This is Bhubaneswar. This is the capital city of Bhubaneswar. And Bhubaneswar has more than 100 temples, including the great Lingaraj temple. Puri has the Jagannath temple. And then Konarak is also on the seashore. A word about the Odisha and Kalinga art of or Kalinga style of temple making. If you know this, it will make interesting reading, because the first one, which is in blue, which is the Khakara Deula, meaning temple. The Khakara style is primarily for Devis Asthana, which means these are for goddesses. That's why you will not find them in the normal temples. Only where there are goddesses which are also tantric god or goddess. In Bhubaneswar, we have one temple like this called Boitala temple, exactly the Khakara style. But let's concentrate now on the green one. The green one, it is actually the Kalinga temple has the Rekha Deula, which is the pink one, and the yellow one is the Pida Deula. Pida is actually, it is a, what you call, you have up to the height of let's say up to this height, that the Pida Deula has the cross section, which is a rectangle or square, and then there is a prism. So the prism and this is basically the place where people collect together. And the pyramid that you see in Egypt, these are all these pyramidal structures. So the prism is on this top, but the top part, if you go to Cairo, you will see these are 4,000 years old and 4,500 years old. But this temple we are talking about is hardly 800 to 1,000 years old. So these places, the yellow place, remember this, the yellow place, the pyramidal one, the prismatic structure over the square cross section, is meant for assembling the people, not for the sanctum sanctorum, for the main god. The main idol used to be in the pink place. So the pink place is the Rekha Deula, and this is the Pida Deula. Pida is actually the steps. So these are stepped, you will see that. So this is the Rekha Deula, the Pida Deula, and the Khakara. So the Kalinga style of temples. This is an actual temple. Those of you who have seen Jagannath temple in Puri, those of you who have not seen also, you see the pyramidal structure here, the prismatic structure over the rectangular or square structure. So these are all the Pida Deula. This is the Natya Mandira, and this is the Jagamohana. This is for the collection of people to see the Lord, and the god or the main icon or the idol will be kept on this temple, which is the Rekha Deula, which is a smooth curve. Come to Konarak. Konarak, of course, is a great experience. Those of you who would come to Konarak would see this is actually a great experience. And in the language of Tagore, the language of stone surpasses the language of man. So the world, this has been declared a World Heritage Site since 1984. Now, the point to make is, if you have seen the previous slides, in the previous slide we have shown that the yellow portion, this is not where the main icon was. Therefore, similarly also here, the main icon were not in the white portion. The main icon, the Lord Jagannath, is here inside this. Whereas here, the people collect, and also the Garuda Stamba is there. No, the Aruna Stamba is there, where you stand and look at the icons or the gods. So now comes the Konarak. It is meant for the worship of sun god, built in 1250, and the copper plate inscriptions say that during the King Ananga Bhima, in his memory, the progeny Narasingha Deva, he built this temple. And I don't have time to go into the history and legend, but primarily why was it built there on the seashore, nearly seashore, which is also known as Orka Kshetra. And the Orka is sun actually, and the Orka Kshetra is primarily the place of sun god. And because the son of Lord Krishna, he was accursed here, and his name was Samba. And Samba actually did penance on one leg, as the legend goes, and was cured. And in the memory of that great cure by the sun god, the temple was built. So originally the temple was like this. We are now describing Konarak temple. So the white part was also there, and this part was also there. This is the Jagamona or the facade. This is where people were collecting. This is where the sun's god was there. The god's icon was there. So the white portion collapsed. Collapsed sometime in 1520 or 1530. The exact reason for that is not known. Primarily, people attribute that to a slightly weaker foundation. Remember, the temple was about 230 feet tall, more than 70 meters tall, and from all accounts, this was the tallest temple in the world. And the eyewitness accounts were actually given by Abul Faisal, the famous historian in the court of Mughal Emperor Akbar, and Aini Akbari is the book. Sadly, the main temple housing the presiding deity collapsed, people say, in 17th or 16th century. So for a close to 400, 500 years, the main temple stood and then it collapsed. So the British came to Odisha in 1803, and in a few years they saw this. 1850, the temple was discovered, but it was all covered up to about 15 feet under the soil, and they started exposing that, excavating it, and then the whole thing came out. Look at what they did. So before the restoration, and so fall of Konark temple, before its restoration, this is how it looked. So this was how the conceptual building is, and you can see the main thing. It is the Natya Mandira, and then the Jagamohana, and then of course the main temple. So the main temple was built in the concept of a chariot was there, 24 horses, 12, and the 12 wheels, and each wheel is more than 12 feet tall, and the concept is towards the east. It moves from the western side. When the sun's beam falls, if you visit that place, they will tell you each wheel can act as a sundial. You can actually know the temple. We don't have time to go into that. This is how artist impression looked in 1837. You can see a small portion of the main temple still sticking to the facade. That also broke later on. So this is how the inside was looking in the year 1820. But this is also an artist impression. You can see a small dog, as a matter of fact, along with the British officers. And this is the old temple. And this is how the history of the Sun Temple is there. This is an interesting part which is there on the main temple. Today you can see it. In the year 1903, the British government decided to fill the remnant of the temple. What you see today is not the main temple. It is actually the facade or the entrance actually, Jagamohana. And in order to save the Jagamohana, the British government asked an engineer, Bishan Swarup by name, from Patna, that you fill it up with sand. So 1903 it started, and he took 6 years. 1909 it was filled with sand in order to prevent further collapse. So this is how the whole thing was done. And Konark, after restoration, this is how it looks. So this is the temple today, but it is not the temple in which the presiding deity was. Presiding deity was at the western side. This is the eastern side. And this is the Natya Mandira. It also had a roof. Roof doesn't exist anymore. It is gone. These are the wheels. You will find the magnificent wheels. And each of the wheels tell you beautifully sculpted from bottom to top. Every inch of space is sculpted. This is a very special figure I want to show to each one of you. You can see an animal here, and this animal is giraffe. This is a very important animal here because giraffe are not natural to India. That means India or Odisha were not natural habitats to giraffe. So how did they picture a giraffe? That means the maritime activities of trade and commerce between India or Odisha or Kalinga and the far off lands, Africa, and also of course Bali and so on. That is why we have a Bali Jatra. It finished only a few days back. So the concept of sun as a chariot, I don't think I will have time to go through that. Let me come to the iron beams. The iron beams are actually lying on the ground. You are entering actually the temple from this. This is the main gate. This is the main gate from which you enter, and then you go towards the temple. On your right hand side, these beams they lie, and the beams are about 27. We have counted now. They are lying there, and some of the beams are, as a matter of fact, they are lying 4-5 beams are 35 feet 8 inches, meaning thereby, or 25 feet 6 inches, some of them. 5 to 6 beams are there which are taller than Delhi Iron Pillar. They are more than 11-inch square in cross section, and the longest ones weigh more than 7 tons. I told you a few minutes back that Delhi iron pillar weighs about 6 tons. So Konarak's iron beams, 5, 6 of them, they weigh more, they're heavier than Delhi iron pillar, they're taller than Delhi iron pillar, but they're lying on ground, people do not even know about it. So we started our work. So the iron beams were used in the temple. Even today, if you come on the eastern gate, as you the main gate you come, you can't enter because this is all filled with sand, as I told you. But you can still see the iron beams. On the northern gate also, you will see the iron beams here. So the site of the iron beam making, we do not know. The scientific work on the iron beams are very important. And we started doing some work, but before that, I published some papers only on my general studies, and that's what I will share. Then I will come to our work and end there. I found out that each of these beams, they have hammer marks, and by now we have all learned how iron beam is made, or iron is made in the ancient Indian tradition. So the solid iron and the liquid slag, they are together when they come out of the bloomery furnace, and they have started hammering. People start hammering it, and in a mold, and when you start hammering it in a mold, which is stone, let us say, and then you get the hammer marks, and you can see that there are places where the forging has been done, but the welding is not complete, and therefore the discontinuities are there. Interestingly, many of these beams that I am showing you, they were carrying the Navagraha, which is the largest Navagraha in the whole world. And one of them has been taken, a slightly smaller one, to British Museum after they cut it piece by piece. But the biggest one, which they have not cut, it is still lying there. Now, how could they carry so much of weight along with the discontinuities? That's the beauty. So some chemical analysis were previously done, and they found out earlier on. For example, one work at National Metallurgical Laboratory, it was published, but M.K. Ghosh was in Tata Steel. Carbon analysis you can see, but more important is the phosphorus. The phosphorus content is much lower in Konarak beam than in Delhi iron pillar, and the method of beam making. The interesting is part of the Konarak iron beam that sets it apart from any other beam or iron structure in India. And we claim now in the world that they have smaller pieces of iron, smaller pieces of flat iron inside the large iron beam. That means we have composite beams. Why? Because the ancestors of ours, they knew that if you have these smaller pieces inside a big beam, its weight carrying capacity goes up, and more important, it has much greater resistance to crack propagation because it is a composite material like the human arm or the bamboo. These are all composite examples of composite materials. Corrosion behavior, yes, corrosion has taken place, phosphorus is lower, but the corrosion is not extremely high considering the fact that it is almost on the seashore, it's only 2-3 kilometers, the sea has also receded, considering the fact that it is lying on the ground for more than 500 years, considering the fact that it has low phosphorus. Considering all that, it still has the corrosion which is limited. So we applied to Department of Science and Technology. But before that, I want to show that one of the earlier works by M.K. Ghosh, he took a piece out and he found that it has a cleavage plane. It's similar, the crack propagated along the length, but he didn't attach much importance to that of the lamination. And I took that up, and when I found that the composition can change, we knew M.K. Ghosh's work showed that the carbon can be different in different places because they are slightly differently made. That means from place to place, depending on the extent of reduction and the ore content, the carbon content can vary. So the microstructure, etc., are not important. I bring your attention to these corner pieces. You see here bamboo-like structures sticking out, and the bamboo-like structures which are sticking out, these are essentially indicative of, these portions are indicative of the smaller pieces which are there. You can see this on the top, it is all smooth, but in the corner you can see the bamboo-like structures which are sticking out, and the sticking out portions are embedded. So we applied to Department of Science and Technology about 2 years back. So I told you that load carrying and crack resistance capacities would go up, and this is the corrosion surface, but it is not fully corroded. Rusting has taken place compared to any other place, but the integrity is quite high. So we wanted to do non-destructive characterization, electrochemical studies, microstructural studies. I would like to show some of them. So the ultrasonic measurement, my colleagues from National Metallurgical Lab, Jamshedpur, we brought them, and this work took place on the 16th of October, only 1.5 months back, or last month itself. And we started doing the ultrasonic work. We started also getting the ultrasonic signals, and that clearly showed that the beams have the smaller pieces inside. You will say, I can see the bamboo-like structures. What is the big deal in doing the ultrasonic along the length? Yes, the big deal is whether the small pieces are continuing all along the length, or in some portions they are discontinuous. So we found out they are discontinuous in places, confirming our belief that small pieces they have there. So very large number of smaller pieces, horizontally they are placed, vertically they are placed. Then you pour for the second time the hot mix of iron and the slag, and once again start hammering, make the large beam, but inside the smaller pieces they continue to remain. This is what we did. Then the potentiodynamic, potentiostatic studies we did. This is a typical what you call potentiodynamic curve, in which there is a passivation layer after some time. This was found out, and we also found out some data from the electrochemical studies. What is the E0 and I0? It's not important, except to show it behaves quite classically, and it's a completely with all these were done also on the beam as well as on a small piece. We took a small piece which was given to us by Archaeological Survey of India, and what we find is that after the first minute, then second minute and third minute, and how the electrochemical behavior changes. Microstructure on the small piece that was given to us by ASI clearly shows ferrite, pearlite, and the grains are quite fine. The grains are quite fine, clearly showing that the smaller beams were definitely cooled at a faster rate, so they are much finer. And that's all I wanted to show, ferrite and pearlite. And concluding observations are, this is the first example of a composite beam in India, definitely in the world also. In the University College of London, I presented it. They are ready to accept. So we have to do more work, which is continuing. In December, we will do more work. So Government of Odisha, ASI, it will not be complete. Last year, Government of India, the Department of Culture and the Archaeological Survey of India, they decided that they will take the sand out of the structure. And so the Department of Heritage in IIT Madras, Professor Arun Menon and his group, they are also associated, and they are now trying to kind of put a blueprint of how exactly the sand will be taken out. It's not easy at all. The CBRI did some work, Central Building Research Institute in Roorkee, and it showed clearly that stones have also fallen inside. You can now imagine the sand has descended. It is no more touching the roof, which is why the Government of India decided, since the sand is not protecting the roof anymore, there's no point in keeping the sand anymore inside. And secondly, it is also exerting sidewise thrust. So by that, it is actually creating a threat to the existence of the temple. Fortunately, the British have already built a very thick wall inside before pouring the sand. So it's quite a complex thing, but I thought I would let the audience know. So recent decision of Government of India is to take the sand out. With that, I conclude my talk, and I would like to thank all of you, and particularly the Center of Excellence for Indian Knowledge System. Thank you very much.
Namaskar, sir. So you talked about there are only 4 iron pillars found in India so far. Is that correct? Am I audible?
Then possibly, yeah. Come again.
Okay. So there are only 4 iron pillars that have been found.
Yes, I talked about the 4 iron pillars in India.
Right. So do you think that there are others which we haven't found yet, or like we can? There is a possibility of finding other iron pillars, and what's the difference between like the ones like Delhi iron pillar? It's still standing. That's why we give it so much more importance than the Konark iron pillars, even though they are heavier and longer. So what is the difference like?
I don't think that I captured the entire question, but yes, the essence of your question is, there are two parts to the question. Am I audible to you?
Yes.
Yes. So the first part of the question was, what are the chances that apart from the 4 iron pillars which have been discovered so far, what are the chances that in India we might find some more iron pillars? To that, my answer is, there are groups working, but we have not had any inkling of other iron pillars in India. And the difference between the various iron pillars, that's a very interesting question. Actually, this is something which I was teaching both at IIT Kharagpur under HISTAI as well as at IIT Bhubaneswar, comparing the iron pillars of Delhi with Dhar. Particularly, Dhar iron pillar is one which was not dug into the ground. The interesting aspect is the Dhar iron pillar was standing on the ground. How can it stand on the ground, such a huge iron pillar? It was standing on the ground because with thin wares, steel wares. So our ancestors knew how to make wares. So from the wares, from all sides of the pillar, they were actually putting heavy weights of stone, and it was balanced. And that is one of the reasons why or how the Dhar iron pillar was balanced for many years. And that may have been the reason also of its fall. You can imagine that sometimes if it gets unbalanced and then it will fall. So that's my take on the iron pillar. The other part is the composition. Yes, there are variations in the compositions. Let me tell you, in Delhi iron pillar itself, Indira Gandhi Center of Atomic Research in Kalpakam did a lot of work in situ on the Delhi iron pillar, which is standing from the foundation to the top. In Delhi iron pillar itself, the carbon content varies, the phosphorus content varies, and the amount of slag which is entrapped. Now, I told you that it is hammered and the slag is expelled. But in so doing, I do not have to convince you to believe that you cannot expel 100% slag. So all ancient iron pillars or structures, they would always show some amount of remnant slag. So therefore the slag content varies, carbon content varies, phosphorus content varies. In the Delhi iron pillar itself, when you go from the foundation or bottom to the top. So therefore your question is correct, that when you go from one pillar to another pillar it varies, and in the same pillar also it varies. Thank you.
Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar.
Sir, just an curiosity question. As the sands being filled in the Konark temple is being taken out,
there is some problem again. I think put it here. Let's see.
As the sands filled in the Konark temple is being taken out.
You are talking of the Konark temple in?
Sand is being taken out.
No, sand filling.
Yes, sir.
You are talking. Are you talking the sand filling?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, whether government has any plan to build the temple back to its glory?
Okay. That you are speaking the minds of at least 3 people from Odisha. Sadly, one of them who was a Padma Vibhushana and a great sculptor, Mr. Raghunath Mahapatra, he died of COVID last year along with 2 of his sons. But yes, he was dreaming of rebuilding the Konark temple with sand. And another gentleman is also there, Mr. De. He is also dreaming of rebuilding the Konark temple. I also have a dream. I don't know whether Government of India shares, but I have shared it with IIT Kharagpur, with Computer Science Department, with AR and VR technology, the augmented reality and virtual reality. We have most of the data now, and we are trying to put up a proposal to DST to allow us to build a proposal in which, yes, you can actually build up with laser beams the AR VR structure, which is a virtual structure of Konark temple. It would look exactly like all its glory, as you use the word, in the ancient times, but you can't touch it, of course. So that should be built. As a matter of fact, by way of information I might share, in Mongolia, the Chinese have done that in many places. At about 12,000 feet, the Mongolian, some of the towers which were demolished, they looked up the records of the history, and they first of all did the structures were built on the AR VR technology, and then a few of them have been actually constructed once the AR/VR technology is there. I think nearer home, the example is Netaji Subhash Bose's the laser bust in Delhi, and which has now been replaced with actual bust. So, if we have all the documents, historical documents, then we can actually build up the temple at a much lower cost without any material, and thereafter we will see what happens. So, the sand removal, yes, the sand removal apparently has started. No, actual process of sand removal has not started. Some of the peripheral work of the auction, I am told, has started, but IIT Madras will be able to give you more details on that. IIT Madras, Government of Odisha, and ASI, Government of India, that is, Archaeological Survey of India. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. I am Dr. P. M. Srinivas, working at Central Sanskrit University. My question is, we have a huge number of texts of Rasaratnagara, Rasaratna Samuchaya, etc. Are we able to produce iron or any metals based on these texts? So, is there any experiment going on in India based on the ancient wisdom?
Again, unfortunately, from the hall, not every word is but
Yes.
more or less I have captured what you have said. You are asking me if, based on the older scriptures,
Yes, sir.
old texts of producing Rasa Shastra, Kautilya's Rasa Shastra of making metals, whether we have started attempting to make metals out of those processes, and if so, what is the process? Is that what you are asking?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, very good. The answer to that, as you can see, my guesswork has worked. I have understood what I have said. Please sit down. What I have to say by way of response is that many people ask, when Delhi Iron Pillar has a lot of phosphorus, and why don't you start making steel? India is making today 110 million tons of steel, and Tata Steel alone makes 33 million tons of steel. Why don't you copy the kind of steel composition that our ancestors did for making the Delhi Iron Pillar? We would have got rustless. That's the first reaction that would happen. Our process of steel making today is not very different from the previous one, because the chemistry cannot change. The chemistry or the physics, laws of nature cannot change. What are the laws of nature? Now, in the nature, you have iron oxide and other oxides, and therefore oxygen has to be separated from iron, which means some reductant. So, the thermodynamics of reduction is a universal phenomenon. So, our ancestors knew, we also know. The whole question is the chemistry. So, they had more phosphorus. Now, question is, did they deliberately have more phosphorus, or it happened so that in their process of steel making or iron making, phosphorus is high? Am I audible what I am saying? Yeah, this is a very important point. In the modern chemistry, modern iron making process, we dephosphorize. Two things we take out. One is sulfur, which is taken out in the blast furnace. The sulfur removal is done in reduction atmosphere or reducing atmosphere, and whereas the phosphorus reduction is done in the oxidizing atmosphere. So today what you do is iron oxide, oxygen has to be removed, you go to blast furnace, add carbon and take the oxygen out. But when you take the oxygen out, the carbon goes inside. And in order to take the carbon out, you go to the steel making furnace, put some oxygen, and so that the carbon is taken out. Then when the carbon is taken out, you have used oxygen, so oxygen has gone up, you use deoxidizer. So therefore the process is, you take the oxygen out, put carbon in, then to take the carbon out, put oxygen in, and then finally take the oxygen out. In the entire process, the phosphorus is taken out in the steel making furnace, and the sulfur is taken in the blast furnaces, which is iron making. So in the steel making furnace, you have to have some slag, and that slag has to be basic slag. I repeat, the slag has to be basic, and the phosphorus removal can take place only there. In our ancient process in India, we did not have a liquid slag to take out the phosphorus, and it was not a basic slag. and therefore phosphorus removal was not possible. So whatever phosphorus was there, what is the source of phosphorus? The source of phosphorus twofold. One, from the ore itself, 50% of phosphorus comes. The other one is from the coal, the other 50% comes. Today we don't use coke, we use coal, and that coal it goes to coke making. We convert that to coke and part coal. So the part of the phosphorus comes from there. Today we don't want phosphorus, so we remove phosphorus. Ancient people, they put phosphorus without knowing how to remove phosphorus. They didn't measure phosphorus. But it so happened that the phosphorus in Delhi iron pillar was high. And Professor Bala Subramaniam from IIT Kanpur proved that because of the phosphorus, the corrosion resistance was high. True. But if you increase the phosphorus beyond 0.04, we know today that the impact resistance of that goes down. We know today that ductility of a steel goes down. And if you have high sulfur, then the Titanic, if you have heard of the Titanic, the ship, which actually shipwreck took place and it broke into pieces, basically because the sulfur was high. Therefore, when you go to low temperature, it becomes extremely brittle. So, Professor, what I want to tell you is, if you put phosphorus, yes, to an extent you can make it higher in corrosion resistance, but it will have extremely low strength in load carrying capacity and in terms of crack propagation. It is true that some of the smart ways of steel making, as we have done in the past 10 years, only 10, 12 years, by use of extremely sophisticated equipment like 3D atom probe, we have used and we have increased the phosphorus in a very innovative way. That is, phosphorus should not go to grain boundaries, it should go to the middle of the grain. Then we can get high strength, some corrosion resistance without making it brittle. But that's a subject of physical metallurgy. I don't want to get into that. But what I want to tell you is, phosphorus was high, we know. And the bronze, brass that our ancestors were making, we know. But we know exactly how to make it. But we also know the demerits of that. So we want to preserve it to understand what they did. We want to admire the past, but we don't want to also inherit all the frailties of the past, the demerits of the past. Thank you.
I have a question here that, there
Can you
was...
announce your name, please, and your
Sir.
institution?
Sir, my name is Pankaj Gupta. Dr. Pankaj Gupta. I am currently with OP Jindal Global University in Sonipat.
I see. In
Yeah.
the OP General in Raigad?
No, sir. I am in Sonipat. It is
Panipat. Okay.
part of the
Soni-
same group.
Okay. Okay.
It is India's #1 university, sir, and also an IOE, Institution of Eminence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, sir, one is that there was some traditional way in which iron was created in the past, and then there is always continuous improvement based on that traditional knowledge. So, I'd like to know that in the current way of steel making, whether we have learned from the past and further improving it, and further taking that question that we have this iron pillar, and now India has created a great thing like the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's statue, 108 feet high, where again, the Loha was collected from all over India. And so I would like to know that when you compare the quality of that Loha Stambha and how this statue has been created, so how do you compare on the quality? Is like the...
Okay.
So
Okay.
it is my first question. And secondly, I would like to know that you did not mention about the Jindal Steel, like they also are a very important player. Was there any reason for that? Thank you.
Okay. Let me take your second question first. The second question is the varieties and so-called synthetic steel, new steel. In the past 15 years, this is, I did not want to, I didn't want to actually get into the modern steel making, steels in the automotive sector, steels in advanced textiles. That is a subject by itself. In one sentence, I want to say, in the past 20, 25 years, the kinds of steel that the world has produced, and I was a part of ultra-light steel autobody ALSAB program in automobiles when I was in Tata Steel, and ALSAB AVC you can check up ULSAV. That is ULSAB, Ultra Light Steel Auto Body. So that was a program from 1996 to 2000, and thereafter for next 3 years we had ALSAP .avc, Advanced Vehicle Program. During that, in the past 25-30 years, we have developed, the world has developed huge amounts of new ideas and new steel making processes. It's all based on physics and mathematics, because this is a designing of microstructure today. It's all designing of microstructure, and therefore a lot of mechanical engineering, physics and mathematics have gone into the steel making of today. And in one sentence, for example, TRIP steel, transformation induced plasticity, DP steel, dual phase steels, then the IF grades, interstitial free gates with high strength IFHS. The Ambassador and Fiats of yesteryears used to have 250, 350 maximum UTS, 250 was the YS. Today, the kind of steel that we are talking about, 650 at least is the YS, and 900, 950 is the TS, along with high amount of ductility. So therefore, we are talking today of ductility and strength combination, which was unthinkable 30 years back. And that has been possible because of a variety of new ideas. By grain size refinement is one such idea, dislocation, twinning, TWIP steel, TRIP steel, these are all some of the new ideas. Some of the last 10 years new steels are what you call the steels which actually depend upon what we call the dual processing steels. Dual phase is one part, and then when you quench a steel to marcitic range MS below, just below MS, keep it there for some time, you can actually have quench partitioning steel. So you can take down QP steel. So the quench partitioning was not known previously. We did some work on stabilization of written austenite. So in short, from the past, we have come a long way. The past 100 years did not see such revolutionary ideas in steel. But in the past 30 or 35 years, there have been revolutionary ideas, because now we have huge amount of these steels. Why did it come up? Because in the year 94, 95, aluminum came up in a big way as far as the energy is concerned, and so automobile body. So the German car makers like Audi, they went for aluminum body. They called it AA8, AA10, AA standing for all aluminum. And then the steel community, 32 steel companies of the world, and only one steel company from India, that was Tata Steel. We joined this world consortium, ultralight steel auto body, and started developing one after another of these new steels. So the new steels are called AHSSS, advanced high strength steels. The advanced high strength steels of generation 1, advanced high strength steels of generation 2, advanced high strength steels of generation 3 is what we are talking about, which are high aluminum, where modulus also can be changed, density can be brought down. That's why it's a completely new area. So another day we'll talk about the advanced steels. But if I compare that with ancient, then I think the biggest knowledge which we learned was the Damascus steels. The Damascus swords and the woods, they are absolutely fabulous. We had developed them 2000 years back. They are fabulous essentially because high carbon, they are micro-grained, and more important, on the sword surface, you run your finger, it is all smooth. But when the sword is wielded on a battlefield, it shows waves. And that is why Tipu Sultan's swords were feared in the battlefield by the British. So much so that they brought actually machines from London to break Tipu Sultan's swords into shreds. So those of you who have been to Srirangapatnam, between Bangalore to Mysore, and go to Tipu Sultan's fort, you will still see the Damascus swords. Today, Damascus swords are there in 80 different museums around the globe, in England and USA and in all European countries. Why is it so very kind of perplexing? And why is it that in the year 1999, a professor like Farhoeven writes, demystifying these Damascus swords? We at NML Jamshedpur, we knew how to make the steel fine grained. These are microns, 3 microns, 4 micron grained. But we did not know why the waviness comes. It is optical waviness. It is not physical waviness. You run your finger, it is all smooth, but from a distance it looks wavy. So that mysticism has been now explored, and we now know that extremely fine carbides, only if the ore was taken from Karnataka ore, then people found that vanadium carbide is there and you get those fine carbides. That's how you get the wavy nature. So that is one technology which is still today respected, and the world is still respecting it, trying to. It is absolutely modern. It is superplasticity. What Damascus swords show superplasticity, but the carbon, the steel that we are talking of in Delhi Iron Pillar and Konarak Iron Beam, from ancient perspective, they are all great, true, and it is forge welding process also true. It is great. For example, when you are forging, 40 people are forging together. How do you forge them? I know we have to stop. Yes. So this is the kind of thing, marrying between, or the blending between the modern idea of steel making and the ancient idea of steel making. Thank you very much for provoking me to come out with these kinds of answers. Thank you.